Nigeria has a problem with power, and it affects every aspect of life. Across the country, electrical power cuts are commonplace and inconsistent power supply is sadly expected. It would not be surprising to hear someone say they have taken light when power cuts happen, or up NEPA when the light has been restored. Who takes the light, and what is NEPA?
Poor. Darkness.
Traumatic is improving.
Very appalling.
For me, would be hell on earth.
I would say they are just playing with our lives.
You know what's in Nigeria generally?
Àwọn olórí.
Electricity has a wide variety of uses. It powers our homes and offices, it heats our food, it provides light in dark hours, and it powers the devices that entertain us, including the one you're watching this film on. Electricity makes our work and lives better. There are 3 components to every electrical power system: generation, transmission, and distribution. Think of the food that fills the home: rice, beef, fish, vegetables. They are all farmed or hunted, packaged and transported, and then distributed to the consumers that need them. Electricity is no different. The grains and vegetables we eat first begin as seeds, which are planted, nurtured, and through the rays of the sun, grown and harvested. Our meat, fish, and other animal protein are farmed or hunted. This is generation. Likewise, electricity has to be generated through a fuel source, which powers the engines that supply Nigeria's national grid. The majority of our 23 plants are thermal powered, which means they are powered by natural gas. Only 3 are hydro dams, which means they are powered by water.
At the generating power station, the generator is just equipment where you generate electricity. How it is done is that you basically have a coil and some magnet which is rotating, cutting the electrical field, and then you have electricity being generated. The key thing is that you need some kind of prime mover, something to move the generator to rotate it so that you can have electricity. Now, basically in this country, we have 2 main forms of generation. The first one is hydropower, where you are using the force of water to turn the machines. We have 3 major power hydro stations, which is Kainji, Shiroro, and Jeba in Niger State. And then the rest of the power stations are thermal power stations, which are powered by gas or petroleum products to drive the turbines. And of course, with the emerging technology, we are having more solar, evolution of solar, which is coming on board because the improvement in the technology is reducing the cost of solar generation. So many countries are sort of mixing their generation to bring in renewable sources such as solar and a little bit of wind. But by and large, we are seeing more interest of solar in this country.
Before our food gets to us, it is transported by every available means of transportation, by land, by air, and by sea, to the market, where it will be available to customers. This is transmission. There is one transmission company, the Transmission Company of Nigeria, which transmits the generated electricity to the 6 geopolitical zones.
Electricity has got to be transported in bulk. In order to transform it economically and minimize the losses, you have bulk transportation through Transmission Company of Nigeria. These are the large pylons you see traversing the country. They convey electricity in large volume at the speed of light to various parts of the country. And then you need to have substations to step them down and distribute to the levels at which electricity can be used.
At the market, The food is distributed to different shops, stalls, tables, and aisles for willing customers and consumers to come and buy and enjoy. This is distribution. For consumers to get electricity, there are 11 distribution companies that serve all the 36 states across the country.
The responsibility for actual distribution to consumers lies in the distribution companies. The responsibility for bulk transportation is a TCN, and then you have various generators which all feed into the same pool for sharing the energy across the country.
We are getting nothing from the power sector that is encouraging. So most of the income we make is plowed into getting petrol, gas, diesel, and all whatnot to power the machines we use, because all the machines we use mostly need electricity.
This generator is giving us so much discomfort, not very, very much. The noise is so much, and it's not good for our mental health. Honestly, immediately the NEPA takes the light, my heart will just skip. It's as if I would just die. The smoke, the noise is too much.
Well, I think in the market, I have been in the market like getting to 20 years. The light issue in the market is very terrible. We hardly get lights, and most especially at times when the market opens around 7:30, we meet the light, but before 9, the light goes off. Till around 5:30 in the evening or 6. And the traders has been on gen, even when the fuel is not there to be found. And you could hear from yourself or see with your eyes the noise of the generator, and then the most pathetic situation is, these are lock-up shops. And by the time the market closes, our wealth, our goods are in the lock-up shops, and then we have to take the gen and the PMS into the shops. So these goods is our where we earn our livelihoods, and they are in danger because anything can happen with it.
Number one challenges we face in this business is NEPA. It's power. Initially, I was staying at ONWUMERE Road because of power failure over there. You can see where we are now, temporary structure. We have to pack our equipment from there and come to this place. I produce plastics, like plastic shoe heels, plastic buckets, plastic hangers, plastic packers, fan base, fan accessories, fan base, fan blade, as you can see, fan guide, what is fan guide, fan neck, fan cup, and others. So the most challenges we are facing in this business is power. Sometimes we'll come out in a day, we'll not see light. Sometimes we'll stay 1 week, we'll not see light. There was a time, even if I tell you my experience there, you pity for us. It's not easy. Then we are using public transformer. Sometimes the transformer will have issue. We will contribute money, the villagers will contribute money and go and buy the transformer and put there. But if you buy, the worst aspect of it is this. If you buy that transformer, the EEDC or PACN, as it may call, will ask you to write letter telling them that you are donating the transformer to them. You pay them before they put light there, and you will write letter. You will write letter giving them that you are donating the transformer to them. But at the end of the month, you will still pay them. Then the transformer you contributed money to buy belongs to them. So we passed we passed through hell there. Power is the most challenges we are facing. Nothing. Power is the most challenges we are facing. Power.
You are now in Nigeria Pipes Limited, Sharada Phase 1, Kano. We produce different types of pipes, right from conduit to drainage to plumbing to waste pipe to oil distribution pipes. We make them. We have the 20 million liter, which they call conduit pipes. It's for electrical wiring. We have the irrigation type. We have the 25 kA, 40 kA, 60 kA, 90 kA, up to 225 millimeters we produce. There are a lot of challenges, but the major ones, power and FX, foreign exchange, to import the raw materials. They are the two major factors. The market is good. Everything other is in place. These two are the major problems that we are now, you see, we started buying AGO from 100 Naira. Now it's 800 Naira per liter. And we're a process industry. We have 3 shifts. Morning shift, afternoon shift, night shift. We shut down every Sunday morning. So you can see, if you cut the production, you get damages, your machine spoils. So you have to run it. Once you start, you have to keep it running. Before, we were paying like 19 million per month for grid, for NEPA, because they were giving up to 15, 20 hours. But recently, we are paying approximately 9 million because they are not giving any power. And our AGO now, we are spending about 31 million in a month. So this is cutting down our profit margin. So it's very, very poor now, very, very poor. But the NEPA, the one from KO, doesn't last. So we have servers, we have automatic changeover. We are more, you can hear the noise of generator since morning. We are more on generator because we have to run the plant.
The National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, was established in 1972 and became the sole agency for electricity generation, transmission and distribution in Nigeria for the next 33 years. From the late 1980s to present day, Nigerians have suffered unstable electricity supply, daily blackouts, and continuous promises of reforms by the government. This would lead NEPA to earn its ironic nickname, Never Expect Power Always. With the return of democracy in 1999, a wave of privatization efforts began with an aim to improve the failing state of a couple of government utilities. A significant one was power. Now, you will hear the words privatization, kilowatt, megawatt, tariffs, or subsidy a lot in this documentary, and also a lot of acronyms: DISCO, GENCO, NBET, NERC, or BPE. Please bear with us. We will try our best to explain all these terms as we go. Privatization is the act of selling a business or an industry so that it is no longer owned by the government. It is the transfer of a business, industry, or service from public to private ownership and control. In 2005, the Nigerian National Assembly passed the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, which effectively kick-started the privatization process of the electric power sector. A couple of important companies were formed. PHCN, the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, to organize the sale of NEPA by dividing all the assets of the power sector into 3 distinct arms: generation, transmission, and distribution. NERC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, to regulate the sector independently, and NBET, the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trader, to handle the commercial aspects of the generating companies. NEPA shut down once PHCN was established and the sale of all the assets began: 6 generating companies and 11 distribution companies. The Transmission Company of Nigeria would remain the only government-owned entity. The privatization process was meant to solve most of the problems in the power sector. It did not. PHCN was given its own inventive moniker. Problem has changed name.
You've got this agency of the federal government called the National Council on Privatization. It's chaired by the Vice President of Nigeria. It has a number of members. And National Council on Privatization works through another entity that is a component part of it called the Bureau of Public Enterprises. The BPE, where I used to work, has various divisions, and one of them deals with the privatization of the electricity sector.
The original concept for the privatization of the generation assets was private sector owning about 51% in the thermal stations, which gradually was reduced over time, while the hydro assets, the hydro power dams, were not privatized. So they were concessioned because there are other concerns around the key asset of water, that powers the hydro dams. In the discourse, right, government sort of sold 60% to private sector while it retained 40% for the federal government. So that's the structure and the nature of the reform itself, both from the regulatory perspective, the creation of the enabling institutions that will support the entire ecosystem of the power sector, and then the main transaction itself, which was the privatization and concession of the power assets.
The objective for privatization, of course, was to attract private investment so that the sector can dramatically transform, improve the level of generation, improve the amount being supplied, make the sector more efficient so that the losses in the sector can be minimized. And with that, it was envisaged that it could then support accelerated program of transforming the economy.
I would define the challenge that we have had post-privatization, right, at a number of levels. There's the policy side, which is also the political will side of it. No reform process can possibly achieve its goals without firm, strong political will, okay? I believe that our first challenges started between 2013, when the takeover was done, and 2015, I think we did pretty well, okay? Rules were set up, NERC got the industry together, and they worked on implementing those rules. We then had an evolution in the market to a new level in 2015, early in 2015. But certain decisions were taken by the same NERC, which created a major challenge for the industry. And we have lived ever since with the consequences and the aftermath of that challenge. And we have actually not been able to deal with it. And the consequence has been that the outcomes that these challenges have produced have only multiplied. So today, we're dealing with a significant level of market failure, all right, that has been exacerbated or caused and then exacerbated by regulatory decisions and then policy decisions which ought not to have been taken, or policy decisions that ought to have been taken at a specific time, but were not taken. And so they have produced themselves their own set of consequences. So what we've had are consequences piling up on consequences.
One of the things that I think we need to understand is that the power sector reform in Nigeria, from the transaction perspective, has been the largest single privatization transaction on the continent of Africa. We need to understand that. And a transaction of that size, it is conceivable that all will not go well. And integrity demands that we'll be sincere and honest about this. Some of the investors, that emerge from that process, perhaps do have challenges around the technical competence, right, to manage such technical intense operations. Valid concern. And I think that the Bureau realized that that might be a concern, subsequently realized that early enough. And that was why part of the process stipulated that the core investors must have technical partners as part of the consortium that bidded for the management of those discos.
For example, the generation companies, really, on the whole, were sold to those who understood what needed to be done. Because our objective in the generation was, if you have an installed capacity of 900 megawatts, but you're generating 200 right now, then our goal is for you to recover the entire 900 installed capacity, because it has to do with various refurbishing work to be done. And by and large, a lot of the company, the generation company owners are doing that, and that is good. It's in the distribution side that we have a serious challenge.
Nigeria's national power grid has collapsed over 130 times in the past 2 decades. In 2022 alone, the grid collapsed over 7 times.
Ana magana NEPA a Nigeria sai dai kawai kai manage in ka same ta yadda ka same ta. Sometimes za ka samu 2 hours, 3 hours, highest 4 hours in a day. Wata rana. Wata rana throughout the day ba za ka samu ta ba.
Like hige simba usu hige intile ne kwa usungu. Bagashu achu winna bi kimbia. So winna bi kimbia bi na usu hatu nege me ashumata be wo kimbi. Ba kimbi ubenje unege pepe kwa zanza tu shegen ki balu wa pokalu wa nege usuye.
Nege tiochi kim hondona. Hige nke deru tankar ho. Wala hondona hondo tiochi ne tsero. Deru tankar wa hondo tiochi hige. Banjisela ya usu alwe usu ngutsembere ya afate hondo tiochi deru ho. Ba hige nke deru tankar wa ki hondo tioye. So usu nguga yoba kimbi usu kinyume. Kanje ukusa ashe na haru to nyero nao. Nyale kango nyale pausi yangu vanga.
I'm not shouting up NEPA. I've decided to be like every other Nigerian who can afford, because you need to be able to afford alternative source of energy for your home. We have become truly, as they say, a government unto ourselves, taking care of our electricity, our immediate environment. So no house is being built. No house can be moved into without generators. I didn't grow up that way. It's now a necessity. If you want to have electricity, you must have a generator. So now it's individuals doing it for themselves. So you have generator, you have inverter, then you have solar. And then when NEPA or PHC, whatever name they choose to call themselves, decide to come, are we industries? What are we producing to be able to need all these alternatives to generate power, to just live? We're existing in Nigeria, we're not living. Because the day we'll live, I don't know if I'll still be here on earth, the day Nigerians truly live a good life. Because the bare necessities are totally non-existent.
Power outages have been part of the fabric of my existence. But not just the outage, the knowledge that the outage is as a result of a system that is eroded by corruption. It's a different thing if you're in a place where there's just not enough power or the infrastructure isn't there, you know. But these two things have been very clear to us our whole life, is that the government is failing, which is leading to the lack of power, and that there is not enough power. For such a vibrant people with such tremendous capacity, I don't know if it can be calculated, the cost to our potential of this one part of our country that has been eroded by corruption, by bad leadership, and bad governance.
Generally, in Nigeria, gbogbo wa náà ló affect. Iná gan wà lára nǹkan tí ò jẹ́ kí gbogbo nǹkan lọ déédéé. So generally ni kò kí ṣe pé bóyá bàbá nìkan ló affect. Ó wà general ni, ó carry everywhere from Ibadan to Lagos ni, from Lagos to Abuja ni. So carry everywhere. So àwọn leader wa náà ní ká bá wá nǹkan ṣe sọ̀rọ̀ ọ̀nà yẹn. Iná ó ń pa business ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀. Ẹlòmíì tó ń ṣe wẹ́dà, mo ní ọ̀rẹ́ kan tó ń ṣe wẹ́dà ní opposite ọ̀dọ̀ mi yìí. Ìgbà kan bóyá àwọn olè náà gbé generator yẹn mọ̀ pé àwọn wẹ́dà àwọn òkè ní shop. Abẹ́ ìkíní wọn náà máa ń gbé generator wọn sí. But kò rí owó ra generator mi. Ó máa gbaṣẹ́ kò ní sí iná. At the end of the day, kó rí pé iná tó sí yẹn, bọ̀bọ́ yẹn kàn rìn kiri ní street mi. Tó ń lọ up and down. ó kọ́kọ́ wa mọ́tò gbà ó wa ọ̀kadà for some times. So àní iṣẹ́ ilé lélẹ̀ most àwọn iṣẹ́ kan wà lẹ́gbẹ̀ẹ́ ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ òróró ra jẹ́ iná ni wọ́n nílò tó máa fi ṣe but torí pé kò sí iná yẹn wọn ò ní choice.
It is not an easy thing for a state like Kano that has highest number of industries, unlike Lagos. It is a very pity or shameful thing to say that there is no constant power supply, more especially to the producing areas or to the producing zones. So we are finding it a little bit difficult. That's why when you went to the factory for the biscuit section, you'll see that there are only operators there. And the operators must be kept constant, whether there is work or not, to make sure that machines are doing normal, so that whenever you want to produce, you don't have to start looking for spanners and what have you.
Like everybody know that you cannot practice tailoring work or fashion design without electricity. To run your machine and fuse, run iron. We have suffered so much for shortage of electricity supply, public supply, apart from generating sets. We have suffered so much from PSCN to EEDC.
Seafood needs constant electricity. I'm talking about crabs, I'm talking about calamaris, and all those sea snails. If you don't have stable light on them, they will go spoiled. Well, as a man, I have to operation, I have family to cater for. And I've already developed an interest in it. That's an interest that I can push on with this and make an edge. And that's my motivation. And whenever there's no lights, we run on generator, as you can see. And it's been like that. Sometimes 3 hours a day, sometimes throughout 3 weeks, we be on generator, because currently what we are making, at least about 20% go back to the fuel now. I was just telling you last month, the amount of fuel we are using per day. We run on 5,000 naira per day generator. I have to burn from morning to evening that we close. Then we resume the second day, we burn from morning, like that. Even Sundays that don't open, I have to come down here, run the generator so that we won't come on Monday and start smelling the middle of the products.
Like for 2 weeks now, we've not seen light. For 2 weeks now. Sometimes they give you 1 hour. 1 hour, I just use it for 1 hour in a day. Then the rest of the working hours, we run diesel. If we run the diesel every day, it means if we're supposed to make, let's say, 20,000 naira in a day, it means 16,500 is going to diesel. So you see that the profit margin has reduced drastically.
You see the amount of light we have on. We need that light, first of all. Then our machines don't work. They won't work without constant light. And there were times that we're in the middle of a test and light goes off. The machine shuts down. You have to start all over again. We're wasting reagents, we're wasting time, we're wasting the patient's precious time, and doctors are waiting for results. We had to get some backup and all that, but you know, backup is not the same thing as constant light. So we really do need constant light.
The problems facing the power sector are wide and varied. One of the main problems facing the sector is the infrastructure deficit. Simply put, Nigeria does not have enough generating plants, transmission infrastructure, or distribution assets to supply consistent and reliable electricity to its large population.
When we privatized, there were a series of missteps that created a market that disincentivized the private owner from investing and growing. It's one thing if it's owned by government and government has the responsibility to invest. Government's primary motive is not profit-driven. But when we privatize, you need to make it worthwhile for investors. And this gap between allowable electricity tariff or electricity cost to the end user and the cost reflective tariff, or what it cost for the power sector or power provider to produce it, created a disincentive for many years on investment. That set us back.
When the distribution companies were sold, for example, the ATC and C laws, and ATC and C laws, the aggregate technical, commercial, and collection laws. Technical is with the wires. There's always a loss on the wires. Commercial is energy theft, essentially. And collection is that you build and you didn't collect. Or you build, people didn't pay in full. So you're having a loss there.
The aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses is the difference between the value of electricity generated and the value of electricity paid for by the consumers. The difference in these values formed one of the core challenges experienced in the privatization process. GENCOs are the electricity generating companies, and DISCOs are the electricity distribution companies.
Now, when it started out, before we carried out the baseline losses study I talked about, they had an average of, I think, 35% thereabout as loss. But when we carried out the baseline losses, we established a 50% loss. So meaning you lose 50 kobo for every naira of kilowatts that you sell. Now, the idea is that you're going to make investments in metering, in lines, automation, to be able to see things that happen across your network real time. When you make all those investments, what you're doing is reducing the losses. So instead of losing 50 kobo, you begin to lose maybe 40, then you go to 30, then you go to 10. Now what happens is that you're now getting more revenues to be able to pay up your obligations upstream. So if the distribution companies are not functioning optimally, the entire value chain will suffer. So that is why distribution business is a very important aspect of the value chain. And that is the interface you have with the customers. So that's why, today, anything that's happened in the sector is the fault of the distribution companies, because that is a segment of the value chain that you have interaction with as a customer. So there's a lot of obligation and expectations from them. They don't care if a power plant has fallen apart. They don't really see them. Nobody sees the power plants. Every in Lagos, nobody sees them or talks to them or do anything. They just know that when I get into my house, I want to switch on my light. I want light there. And if the light is not there, then Abuja Disco at fault. In Lagos, there are two distribution companies, Ikeja and Ekpo. So wherever you live, you will blame them.
Normally, when you look at this variable of combining these three levels of losses, at takeover, for instance, in AEDC, the losses were in the region of 59%. You can imagine that similar discos were in that range. No wonder the industry had to be privatized so that investment can come in to drive down the losses. So at a glance, if you want to see how a disco is performing, you must look at the trend. How has it managed the losses over the years?
The distribution company has to be in a very healthy position, have to ensure that they are performing optimally, to ensure that every energy they get and they purchase and they sell, they're able to collect all that money. Because if they don't, then the market participants upstream, the generators, TCN has different service providers. So when we talk about service providers in electricity market, we're talking about TCN that has the system operator. The system operator is the one that does the dispatch. You have the market operator, which deals with the commercial aspects of billing and stuff like that. You have TSP, which is a transmission service provider that takes care of the wires, the lines, essentially the assets of TCN. And then you have MBT. It's also a service provider. It's a trader. So it's paid for the service it provides as a trader. Then you also have NEMSA, So you have NERC, the regulator. These are all service providers that the market pays for. So from the revenue required that is established and divided by the energy, that tariff is allocated to different customers to ensure that the revenue you have established is recovered. Now, if it's not fully recovered, you have what we call a shortfall. If it's not recovered, meaning there are people along the value chain that will not get their money.
I have a friend. She has a great analogy that I've also started using myself. Yeah, she talks about the woman who sells akara, right? And there are the different components that go into that akara that she makes. You know, there's the beans, the oil, the ingredients that go into it, her labor for frying it, and then she has to sell it, right? And let's say she sells the akara for 50 naira or 100 naira, right? But the cost of all the ingredients that go into the akara turns out to be 500 naira. Would she keep coming out to sell her akara every day, or is she going to go bankrupt at some point and not be able to sell akara the next day? You know, the answer is very obvious. There is no way you can produce the akara cost price at 500 naira and sell it at 100 naira and hope to be in business. It can't work, and that's the problem. We're approaching a situation where the generating companies, if we're not able to pay them, will get to a point where they will shut down. They cannot produce the power. And that's the real challenge. Now, this is not a Nigeria-specific problem. Every country in the world where you have to deal with either removal of fuel subsidies or you have to do tariff increase and so on, they run into this same challenge, especially democracies, right? But the challenge is for government to find a way to communicate to the people, because the people are smart, they understand it. But they must see that you're genuine in what you're trying to communicate. They must see that you have plugged all the other places where there are leakages, and that the only way to solve this problem is to increase the prices. When you don't get them to that point, they will not support the program. And what we're suffering from in Nigeria is a trust deficit, and until we address that, we won't be able to, make the big decisions we need to make.
A regulator is something like half government, half private sector. So yes, created by government, but they're not line ministry. They're not the usual department of government. So they are not going to be going to the president or the minister asking with the codes. They're going to act. They have a commitment to independence and neutrality. So that is what incentivizes and encourages private investors to come to that sector. Because if without a regulator, they're not sure of the rules. So the regulators set the rules. So they know the rules of the game. They know what they ought to do. They can calculate with their calculator how much they will get. And so those projects they want to develop looks credible and bankable, because they know that there's a regulator who will develop a pricing formula. That regulator will not easily change it, except through a process of consultation and fact-finding and rational process.
NAC, we had spent 2010 to 2014, chairman, commissioners, everybody, preaching to Nigerians. In order to get the right quantity and the right quality, we need to pay the right prices. All right? So we're going to move the prices up gradually. Q1 2015, January 1st, NERC brought in, May 1st, 2012, we moved the tariffs up a little bit. Nigerians accepted it. 2013, after the privatization, we started a process that would lead to a new kind of market in which you had new tariffs. January 1st, 2015, we moved tariffs up again. And for the first time in the history of Nigeria, they were accepted to be cost reflective. January 1st. February 1st, we started a new electricity trading market that was based purely on contracts. And more players were joining that market. It was a matter of a gradual movement. March 25th, I believe, or April 25th, just a few days before the elections, NERC, the same NERC that had introduced higher tariffs, correctly set tariffs, cost-reflective tariffs on the 1st of January, turns around and reduces the tariffs. All right? Takes a decision that as much as 30% of certain tariffs for certain classes of customers would go out. Drop the tariff. After promising to the players that we would set tariffs right. You can't spend 4 years trying to set a market on the right platform, economically, financially. People make investment into that market. Bankers lend money into that market. And then the foundation, the basis on which they take their decisions, in other words, the economics are right. You remove it unceremoniously, unilaterally, without consultation.
So that's why we've not got it right. We've got a wrong model. We've not done a thorough diagnosis, and we've not been consistent in sketching a new policy and creating actions. For example, you know that you said you want to privatize, you want to corporatize, because the sector is being run inefficiently. Then when you started the NIPP, the Nigerian Integrated Power Plants, you start citing them in Kogi, one in Kogi, you start some in Lagos because the print is from Southwest. The gas you use is in Niger Delta. So if you're a good doctor, a good clinician, you diagnose a problem. It's okay, we need to have quick delivery of 10,000 megawatts. Where's the gas? Niger Delta. Let's put all the power plant there. Bingo, you're right. But now you're thinking about, oh my God, how do we build a power pipeline to carry gas from Niger Delta to Olonusogo, somewhere there. So that's problem. So the first is diagnosis. Second one is project management failure. As a country, without managed projects. Let me give you an example. Just watched the court deliver presidential election tribunal petition court, the tribunal, okay? They delivered a judgment. To today, they are still waiting for the text. People who want to appeal, besieging there, say, give us the judgment. Now, you know what's project management? Project management, before you fix that date, they would have finished everything, written it out, have the judgment ready. As they're delivering it, the few minutes after it's on the website. So it's not only in power, in everything, judicial, hospital, we are chronic poor project managers. And if a country that doesn't know how to manage project end to end, they're going to have serious slippages. And that's what results in the power sector collapse. So my short answer is first, wrong model. We didn't diagnose our problem well, and design interventions too will have the capacity to have effective implementation. So even if the policies are not perfect, if they are properly implemented, they will go a long way to solve the problem.
So in the past, the government of Nigeria provided power as a social service, right? You expected that the way you wake up in the morning and you can breathe air, that you are entitled to power. And we haven't been able to get over that, to realize that power is actually a business. It's a commodity you've got to pay for to get, right? It's almost like saying, if we got phone service free, would we have good phone service in Nigeria? Yeah. So that's the kind of situation we find ourselves in. Nigerians grew up where, knowing that government provided power almost for free. You wake up, you leave the lights on, you go to work, you come back in the evening, and life goes on. Well, that can't continue. We've gotten to a point where we must pay for the power for those who are in the power supply business to be able to supply the power. There is no way they can supply the power if we don't pay for it. So if you really boil it down, it comes down to that. But there are different ramifications to this issue. There's the fact that the government hasn't done everything it's supposed to do. There's the fact that, some of the folks who bought the companies, maybe they are not the right people to buy the company in terms of that they don't have the technical know-how or the financial muscle required to fix the sector. There's the part that the economy has also moved against the sector. So if you take tariffs, for instance, some of the tariffs were calculated at 199 or 198 naira to $1, and we haven't reversed that. There are multiple issues. So on the consumer side, it's the fact that we haven't realized that we have to pay for power. On the government side, it's that government still has not realized that it has to decide whether it's a socialist government or a capitalist market-driven government. So you have a government that really wants to do right by the people and thinks that the way to do right by the people is to provide cheap power, but maybe that's a roundabout way of not really helping the people. So
you have the power sector reform program, which is a collaboration between the federal government and the World Bank to address these key challenges along the power value chain. Second, there is also the Presidential Power Initiative, which is generally referred to as the Siemens Project. Now, the promise of that initiative essentially is to see how we move the endpoint experience of power delivery from the current 5 gigawatts or 5,000 megawatts to 7,000 in the first phase, 11,000 in the second phase, and 25,000 megawatts in the third phase. The Siemens project, the PPI project, is ongoing, and it promises to resolve the bottlenecks in the first and second phases, the bottlenecks in transmission and distribution, so that that whole 17,000 megawatts you have can flow downstream to the consumer. The third initiative, and we have to really give credit to CBN in coming out to support the DISCOs and TCN in ensuring that some of these bottlenecks are also resolved. So CBN has two major initiatives: the CAPEX program, which addresses the infrastructure deficit in the sector, and the OPEX program, which addresses the commercials in terms of making the sector whole.
Why is it that, we have provided as government, they've provided 213 billion through CBN, 701 billion through CBN, another 600 billion, almost 1.5 trillion naira. Why has the problem not been solved? Now, I'll tell you why. When you subsidize a market, subsidy has to follow contracts. So if a distribution company buys power, for example, which is supposed to be 1 billion naira, I'm using that as an example. So every month I buy energy worth 1 billion naira. Now, remember I said to you that MBT is a company that buys power and sells. Now, if MBT issues me a bill for 1 billion naira worth of energy I've purchased, it means that I owe 1 billion. So if I paid 800 million naira, it means I'm still owing 200 million, isn't it? What this means is that on my books as a distribution company, I have a liability of 200 million because I only paid 800. That 200 is money that government should have paid because they said, freeze your tariffs, we're going to provide the subsidy. Now, what should happen, or what should have happened, is that when MBT was sending the distribution company their bill, they should have sent a bill of 800 million naira, not 1 billion. What that means is that on that invoice, you say that you consume energy worth 1 billion. However, the subsidy component is 200 million, DISCO component is 800 million. So if a DISCO didn't pay the 800 and paid, let's say, 600, the 200 is their liability, not 400, because the 200 is a subsidy. So what has happened over the years is that the invoices that have been coming to DISCOs is 1 billion naira. So all that money is sitting on their books. Now, if you have all that money sitting on my book, and I go to the bank, there's no way any bank is going to lend you any money. So today, the distribution companies have over 1.5 trillion naira sitting on their books as liabilities with zero equity. There's no bank that can give them money for any investment. I was actually privileged in talking to a few of the bankers some time ago. And they are even wary to providing working capital. So if a bank is wary about providing working capital to manage its risk that it sees in the market, how can you advance, the kind of capital we're talking about in billions of dollars? So today you have a more or less bankrupt distribution sector. It's bankrupt, just that it is a going concern. You have to carry on. You can't shut down. But literally, they are bankrupt because they are not able to meet their obligations as at when due. And that's because their balance sheet have been completely impaired by all these interventions, which are supposed to have passed through their books and gone upstream, cleared, so it allows them to borrow money, but they have not been able to do that. So the expectation is that if there's going to be any further intervention, which is subsidy, then it has to be structured properly to ensure that the value chain is completely healed, not skewed in such a way that one part of the market is unable to function, which is what has happened over the years. So in a nutshell, that is what the intervention is. I'm sure you must have heard about tariff shortfalls, which I've explained. You've also heard about market shortfall. What's the difference? The difference between the tariff shortfall and the market shortfall is that the tariff shortfall is as a result of the government freezing tariffs below the cost reflective levels. The market shortfall is that you, MBT, issued the distribution company an invoice of ₦1 billion, but I only paid you 50% of that. The difference of 50% is what the market shortfall is.
This word is very popular in Nigeria. It's called subsidy. A subsidy is a sum of money paid by the state or a public body to keep the price of a commodity low. Like petrol and electricity tariffs, subsidies are prone to corruption. Another major problem facing the power sector is one that is quite familiar and plagues many sectors of the country as a whole: corruption and mismanagement. Corruption in the power sector happens both from the government, top down, and also from the consumer, bottom up. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam commenced construction in 2010 at a cost of $5 billion. The first phase of filling the reservoir began in July 2020, and the dam produced electricity for the first time in February 2022. In contrast, in 1982, Nigeria commenced the construction of what was to become the biggest dam within the continent, the Mambilla Hydropower Dam. It was touted to generate 3,000 megawatts of power at a cost of $5.8 billion. As of 2018, it was 5% complete, with various litigation and administrative issues.
The cost of corruption relates to the cost of availability of light. Okay? The cost of darkness is infinite. I mean, it cannot place value on it because it absolutely pervades every aspect of life. It's not merely that you have a company, you don't have electricity to run it, that you have to buy diesel. No, there are so many other aspects, social life, your inability to be secure, security situation can get exacerbated by the fact that you don't have light. A city in darkness, that's just an invitation for all kinds of activities.
From inflated government contracts to government ministries, departments, and agencies not paying their electricity bills, government action or inaction has contributed to the poor performance of the power sector. As of July 2021, the International Center for Investigative Reporting found that federal, state, and local government ministries, departments, and agencies owe discos up to 202 billion naira. Corruption on the consumer side primarily happens through energy theft, from the consumers who make illegal connections to those who bypass their meters trying to cut down the cost of their electricity bills. These practices lead to a loss of revenue for the distribution companies, which negatively affects the entire power sector value chain. It is difficult to estimate the cost of corruption as it affects virtually all aspects of life. The lack of reliable power is a significant constraint for citizens and businesses, resulting in annual economic losses estimated at $26.2 billion or 10.1 trillion naira. It creates a loss of revenue, of productivity, of standard of living, reputation, and a loss of life. While the situation is discouraging, there are a few pockets of hope, one of which comes through off-grid solutions. Grid electricity, or on-grid electricity, is the national infrastructure of generation companies, pylons and electric cabling, transformers and the meters that bring electricity into homes and offices. NEPA, PHCN, and now the generation, transmission and distribution companies all fall under on-grid electricity. Off-grid is as the name implies. Any electricity generation and supply solution that is not on the national infrastructure, from regular petrol and diesel generating sets to complex solar power solutions with solar panels, inverters, and batteries. One company that provides off-grid energy is Green Village Electricity, or GVE.
I think when GV came, most especially like this block is one of our blocks for test running. This is a pilot block with GV. And then we begin to experience normalcy in the light issue. Because immediately when the light is not there, the GV immediately takes off. And those in this block enjoy the lights. But the other aspect of it is we are still on the process to see that the whole market was energized with the GV, so that those who benefit or enjoy this light in this block will equally enjoy it like those who are here.
We believe that the project, when it comes on stream, would unlock possibilities of the discos and the independent power producers like us working together to solve the energy problem for markets and business hubs, right? We are motivated by the fact that our current customers in the pilot project are happier and they are more productive, their revenue has improved, and they are also sharing this information with their counterparts.
Because if you compare as a businessman, if you take 10 liters of fuel, which is around 3,000, and then if you put that 3,000, it will last like 1 month plus. So you can see the margin are very wide. So the difference is very clear, and we prefer GV.
Now, very few people know this, but there is a company on the plateau where I grew up called NESCO, Nigeria Electric Supply Company. They started in 1929 with a series of hydro dams, small hydro dams, a couple of megawatts each, scattered around the rural plateau. And these were to generate electricity to power the tin mines and the communities around the tin mines. When the tin mines closed down in the 60s and 70s, this company then was left alone as a sort of private integrated power utility and was licensed to provide power to what is now 7 local governments in rural plateau. Basically like just the outskirts of Jos and then north and so on from that. And so what that meant is it was the only power company in Nigeria that was not under the NEPA monopoly, was not under government control. And they generated, transmitted, and distributed and collected for power. So they did all of those that, in the industry now, everyone else is separated. You don't have anyone integrated like that. And so up to this day, in those 7 local governments, there are tens of thousands of households that actually have 24/7 power from the grid. They get their bills, they pay their bills, and they enjoy electricity, and they don't have generators. So almost 100 years, 90 years now, this part of Nigeria has had reliable power. And so it shows us that it isn't that Nigeria cannot do it. We've done it. We're actually doing it in part of Nigeria. We just need to take that model to the rest of the country, and that's it.
A new Electricity Act was passed by the Nigerian Senate in July 2022 and signed into law by Nigeria's new president in June 2023. The main aim of the bill was to demonopolize generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity at the national level, to empower states, companies, and individuals to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. Everyone has to play their part. As a consumer, there are a few things to do to help improve the electric power situation in the country. Do not make illegal connections to on-grid electricity. It is energy theft. Do not bypass your meter, even if it is just one fridge or one air conditioner you take off your meter. It is still energy theft. Pay your bills. If you do not have a prepaid meter, you can contest an estimated bill at the DISCO office or your local NERC office. It is your consumer right. Stay informed on developments in the power sector through the resources on your screen. On the government side, it is essential to curb corruption at all levels and in all circumstances. States need to take advantage of the Electricity Act of 2023 to improve electricity generation and supply to their residents. Government ministries, departments, and agencies need to pay their electricity bills when due. Ensure there's proper communication about government efforts and interventions in the electricity sector and keep consumers informed. Fully privatize the sector for efficiency. Stable electricity is a possibility in Nigeria. It is already a reality in some parts of the country. With mini-grid and off-grid solutions, the path to full sufficiency is not as long or arduous as imagined. The electricity sector in Nigeria has a checkered past and a bumpy future ahead. It will take concerted efforts from both the government, private sector, and consumers to achieve lasting solutions within the sector. Is the future bright? That's anybody's guess.